Hi, and thanks for tuning in to BEaTS Research Radio. For those that don't know us, we're a podcast and YouTube channel that opens the doors of research to the community. I'm Janïs Petit, and I'm back as your host for today's episode. Today, we're joined by Krista Lamb. Krista is a journalist, a writer, and a podcast host for multiple podcasts. She is a podcast host for the Diabetes Canada podcast, which won the Canadian Podcast Award for Outstanding Health and Fitness Series in 2020. Krista specializes in translating complex medical science into compelling stories for everyone. And she seems to be doing just that in her new book that is coming out very soon. The book is titled Beyond Banting, From Insulin to Islet Transplant, Decoding Canada's Diabetes Superstars. Sorry. The book tells the research stories and amazing advances that are made towards the cure of diabetes since Banting's time. So welcome, Krista. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you so much for having me. It's great to be here.
Yes, I'm a little nervous because, as I said, you're a podcast host, so we're like reversing the roles technically because I'll be asking you some questions.
Yeah, don't worry. I feel the exact same because I'm used to asking the questions.
Awesome. I want to start by talking about your new book. Could you give us maybe like a quick summary, like tell us what the book is about?
Sure. The book is basically based on the work that I started doing with the Diabetes Canada podcast. I was telling these stories in these 15-minute episodes about diabetes research that's being done across Canada. And I realized that so many people don't know what's happening in this field outside of those in the field. And it's so spectacular and so inspiring, the work that's being done. So I really, really wanted to translate that into a bigger story and to tell a more robust sort of example of what is happening and to give people something to remember that, Banting is absolutely incredible and his work was incredible. And we have done so much since then.
Yeah, I'm so excited. I'm really excited to read it actually. I feel like it's going to be such an interesting read. Could you give us maybe like a sneak peek of like your favorite part of the book or like a fun story that would be nice to share with everyone?
Absolutely. It's really hard to pick a favorite because so many of the stories were really inspiring to me or I learned something. But one of the things, and I don't know if it's the happiest story, but it's one of the stories that I just feel really resonated with me. The work of Dr. David Campbell, who is from the University of Calgary. He specializes in diabetes and homelessness, which wasn't a topic I was really familiar with. And when I had him on the podcast, I was just so blown away. And then I really wanted to talk more with him. And what he does is he works with people who are experiencing homelessness or housing insecurity to tell their stories. Because often in research, we have an idea about what we think the problem is. But until you talk to someone who's actually living with that problem, it can be really impossible to know. And so he brought together a group of people who were dealing with homelessness and who lived with diabetes. And he did this fantastic research project where he really just asked them to tell him what their greatest barriers were. And then he asked them, well, how should we tell the world about your problem? And they said, well, what about a photo essay? And so they created this wonderful photo exhibit. And until you see the photos, you don't understand how great this is. But you walk in and you see this exhibit full of photos that are taken by people who are homeless and who are living with diabetes that really showcase the issue for them. And so there was one photo that a woman in the exhibit took, and it was a picture of what she had to eat at a homeless shelter. And you look at that and it's like cookies and orange slices, and you're like, no, that's not what you should be eating if you have type 2 diabetes. But that's what her options were. And so her options were eat that or don't eat. And it really brought to life this research study in a way that could translate the work so powerfully. And so I was really excited to include that in the book because I think, one, it's something we don't think about. And two, it's just a great example of how you can communicate science in a different way and have such a powerful response and get people really interested in a topic that maybe they just didn't think about before.
Yeah, this is actually something I've never really thought about, but of course, if you have to pick between eating or not eating, what would you do, right? That actually sounds so interesting. I'm excited to read that part of the book for sure. Um, you seem so passionate about diabetes, about the cure to diabetes, and you have the podcast and everything. And I want to know, like, what made you gravitate towards diabetes? Why did you pick that specific topic?
Yeah, I talk about it in the book because it was an unusual path. Both of my grandmothers had type 2 diabetes. I also grew up surrounded by family members and friends who had both type 1 or type 2 diabetes. And so it was always in my life, but I never thought about it that much. And one of the things that I think is really interesting is that for many people, they think, well, diabetes, we have insulin, we're fine. It's not a big deal. And the more I learned about it, I realized, wait, no, that is actually really inaccurate. And so for me, especially learning about the research, I wanted people to better understand the needs of people with diabetes, but I also wanted them to know that there are people working to make things better. Because I think there's so much we need to learn about diabetes as a community and as a society, and so much more that has to be done.
Yeah, that's true. There's a lot to be done. Um, I read a few of your articles and I listened to like a couple minutes of your podcast. And as I mentioned in the intro, it seems like for you turning something so complex in science, like, as a scientist, I'll read it and even I'll be sometimes kind of confused. I'll have to reread, search a few things. But it seems like you just make everything sounds so easy to read. It seems so natural for you to just translate that into, like the everyday type of work. Like, is that something that's like important for you to do? Like, do you think that it's kind of like your duty as a writer?
I think that it's really important in science that we are able to tell these stories. And because I come from a journalism background, I don't come from a scientific or
Hmm.
academic background. I think it's even more important for me to tell these stories in a way that people understand and are excited, and are maybe not as excited as I am about them, but at least understand why they're important and why people should be paying attention to them. And I think that comes to play too when I think about what I would like, and that is I would like more funding for the research so that these treatments and cures and all of the things that are possible can actually sort of move a little bit forward. And I think that people aren't going to be willing to fund something if they don't understand it.
Right, that's very true. Science is really blocked until we get money. There's no, that's the secret to it. It's very sad to say, but if there's no money, there's no research, and if there's no research, there's no cure. So that's honestly like something awesome that I think you're doing because you're opening the door to that. You're opening the door to, I think, a broader like possibilities for research, which is really cool and really interesting. Um, you mentioned that you don't have a scientific background. How did you become so good at translating that knowledge?
Well, first, thank you for saying that because it's definitely something you worry about when you don't have a background in this. But I think it's something where if you're really interested, curiosity can be such a motivator. And I was so interested in the work when I started learning about it that I just kept asking a billion questions. And I don't have any fear of asking a question to someone who maybe is a principal investigator or who seems intimidating, with a few exceptions. But for the most part, I just want to know. And so it may be a silly question, or it may be a question that if I had an academic background, I wouldn't need to ask. But I think sometimes we forget when we work in research and science that not everybody has that background. And if I don't know, it's a pretty good bet that a lot of other people don't. And so I think part of it is just not being afraid to just say, hey, what does that mean?
Yeah, that's so true. Honestly, like it's kind of crazy to me. Like I never really thought about it. Like, like if I can't understand it, how many other people can't, right? I want to talk about your journey. How did you, become like an author? How did you become a writer? Like, maybe like your studies, if you did any, or I don't know. Maybe talk to us about your journey. How did you get to where you are now?
Sure. Well, I had a very roundabout career. I started with a degree in journalism. I was convinced I was going to be an entertainment journalist, which, if I had known what I know now, I would know is a very difficult field to get paid in.
Mhm.
So I really quickly decided that I would rather tell stories in a different way. And I moved into the nonprofit world after about 15 years of working in entertainment. And all along, what I was doing was telling people stories. Like the entire time of my whole career is I tell people stories. And when I got into the diabetes realm, I realized that, I spent 15 years working with rock stars, but the real rock stars are the researchers who are doing these amazing things. And so it became even more important to me to tell those stories. And so I had a lot of experience translating different types of research for the years and years, but it really wasn't until I hit on diabetes that I found something that resonated. And so that's what I've been doing for the last few years, and really loving it, and just really hoping that some of what I do can inspire some of the young scientists and help them realize that, hey, your work is so important. And sometimes when you're stuck in the lab and you're, inundated with all of these like things that you have to do, it might not seem like it, but I hope they'll read some of these stories and be like, you know what, I am pretty cool.
Yeah, that's awesome. Honestly, it's so like I feel like it's such a random journey, like you're stuck with us, all the scientists, and bring out the knowledge. I love it so much because it's kind of what we try to do here with the podcast. But you're turning it into a book, which is so awesome. I saw somewhere, I don't know if it's true, but is this going to be the first book that you're releasing?
Yes, it's my first book. And I always say that writing a book is not something for someone who likes instant gratification. Podcasts much better for that because it's been 3 years since I had the idea
Wow.
to write this book. The process of bringing it to life, and it's kind of amazing to think that I'm actually going to get a paper copy of my book at some point and be able to hold it. So,
Awesome. You don't have one yet? You don't have your own
well, I mean,
copy? You're
I've
still
read
waiting?
it.
Really?
But no, I haven't actually seen the actual book yet. So that
Oh,
like
that's
I think I'm really looking forward to that moment when I get to open the box,
mhm,
and there are my books. But yeah,
awesome.
it's been 3 years. Yeah, I'm ready.
Your baby is finally, arriving in the real world.
And so excited to finally see it come to life.
Do you want to share with everyone the release date or maybe where they can find your book if they're interested?
Absolutely. So the release date officially is March 1st, which is coming up really quick. And you can get it right now via pre-order. And once this comes out, it'll probably be out in the world. And so you can get it at all the places you would normally get books. So, your Amazons, your Kobos, and all of the different places. And it'll be released as an ebook as well as an actual hard copy book.
That's awesome. I'm so excited to get my hands on it and read it. I have one last question for you. Um, so, your journey as a writer is very inspiring. It's also very different since you're writing about something that wasn't your original, the topic that you wanted to originally write in. Could you maybe give advice to young writers that maybe want to write something out of their comfort zone, or even scientists that want to become writers that are not, you know, they weren't made to be writers or they don't think that they were made to be writers?
Yeah, absolutely. It is one of those things where if you feel like you have a book in you, you probably do. And it's a really, really tough process. Like I won't lie and say that it's super easy, but it is something where, once you learn how to do it, and I get this question all the time, like, how did you write? How did you get this? How did you get a publisher? How did you do all of these things? And,
Mhm,
there's so much process involved that sometimes it can seem really overwhelming. And like I said, it's not a short process. You write a proposal and then you have to start pitching and you go through all of these channels. So my one thing is, if you want to do it, I say go for it. See if you have a book in you. However, just be prepared to put the work in because it's like
mhm.
anything that you really want to do. There's a lot of process, there's a lot of steps, but if you take them and your book gets to a place where it's out in the world, it's a really great feeling.
Mhm, I bet. Sorry, I said it was the last question, but I'm curious, so I have one more for you. You said it was, it's a journey, and I'm sure it was like, a lot of up and downs to write everything down. I would be very frustrated. I don't know how you felt, but I want to know maybe what was like your favorite part of your journey, and maybe like your least favorite part that maybe you wish could have been a little bit different.
I think my favorite part was truly doing the interviews. And I interviewed so
Mhm,
many people for this book, and not everybody made it into the book, which makes you feel, sad. But I was able to talk to people like the fourth patient, like patient four for the Edmonton protocol. So someone who is alive and who is healthy and thriving because he was able to participate in a research study that ended up being successful. And so there's something so incredibly inspiring about having that
mhm,
opportunity to talk to him and to, really experience, through his eyes what he went through and hearing about how different it is from when he was 19 and he passed out from a hypoglycemia incident in a snowbank
wow,
and might not have made it, if someone hadn't found him, and all of these really personal stories that people were so kind to share with me. And also many of the scientists, they shared stories about their successes, but they also talked about the times where they messed up and the times where they didn't have the perfect journey. And that was really wonderful too, because I think it was a reminder to me and hopefully to other young scientists that, those people that are in their offices and who have these big titles, they made mistakes along the way. and it wasn't always easy for them. So I think those were the things that meant the most to me. That and just how amazing the community is. Like, there's so many things I loved about writing this book. I don't think you like try to write a book about something like this unless you really love it. I mean, there are hard parts. Like, there's some like transcription I would not recommend. The hundreds of interviews all had to be transcribed. There's like the slog part, the part where you're just like, oh, I want it to be ready, and you have to go through, it gets edited, then it gets edited again, and then it gets edited again. And I was really, really lucky because I'm not a scientist, as we mentioned. And here I am in the middle of a pandemic, and I'm reaching out to some of the top PIs across Canada and saying, I have this book. Would you mind reading a chapter just to make sure I didn't mess up the science? And they all said yes. So, all of that editing and all of that stuff, it was hard, but it made me really happy the way people responded and were so willing to help.
I'm so excited to read your book. I mean, like, we got a couple previews of a few stories and it sounds super fun and fun. Not this, you know what I mean. It sounds pretty nice to read and inspiring. So it's the end of today's interview. Thank you so much for being with us, Krista. I'm so excited. As she mentioned, her new book is going to be is available for pre-order right now, but it's coming out officially March 1st. I think we can put the link in the description below, so you'll be able to buy it if you're interested. I just want to remind everyone that BEaTS Research Radio is supported by the University of Ottawa Heart Institute, BEaTS Research Lab, and the Department of BMI of the Faculty of Medicine at the University of Ottawa. Our director is Dr. Emilio Alarcon. Thank you for joining us, and don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel and podcast platform. You can also follow us on Twitter for more updates. Thank you.